can be slippery. It rains in the winter. It's very dry in the summer. The killer likely followed the same path you're walking down to the beach. Again, go to zodiackiller.com and read about the Lake Berryessa killings, and notice the similarities of how the killer likely approached the victims here, how the killer likely asked the female victim to tie up the male victim, and how perhaps he tied the male victim after the female victim did, because the female victim didn't tie the male victim very well. There are some other similarities. Compare those. As you look out here, you'll see the flat part of the beach now. It was much more sandy in 1962 when I was there, and perhaps that's why it was more enjoyable for Bobby and Linda to lie on this section of the beach. If you look off in the distance, you'll see the Santa Barbara Channel Islands there. Quite a beautiful scene, not as clear today. This particular piece of film was filmed in February, so it's a lot different than perhaps it would be in the summer. Also, there's a great deal of moisture here. This looks up the wash where Bobby and Linda likely ran after they were attacked to try to escape, up the wash and underneath the bridge. You can get through the bridge and back up on the other side. We would occasionally run into people fishing in this section of the beach in '62, but they typically would walk down the beach when we kids would show up. We would go to the beach with a wash bucket filled with ice and soft drinks. We'd get in the water to cool off, at least up to our knees and so on, and start a fire from old wood we would find. We typically would stay until 9 or 10 p.m. and then go home. I found an old wash bucket during this trip, but I'm sure it wasn't one of ours. Now the stream is eroded deep, and there's no path up near the beach to the location of the old shack, which was destroyed shortly after the murders. In the few times we came here as kids, I never saw anyone staying at the shack. I'll try to reconstruct the crime from Detective Baker's statements on the website. Bobby and Linda were sunbathing here that afternoon. This is the same location we would bring our blankets in 1962. I never came to this location with Bobby or Linda. I know he came here several times before the murders. The information then reports that they were approached by the killer sometime on the afternoon of June 4th, 1963. The time suggested is about 3 p.m. The killer may have approached them by walking down the same trail from the top of the hill. He may have pulled a .22 caliber weapon, likely a rifle, to control them. There may have been a physical altercation between Bobby and the killer, which I'll explain later. The killer then had Linda use some pre-cut sections of rope to tie Bobby's hands from behind. He may have had Bobby lie on his stomach. The killer then attempted to tie Linda's hands. Bobby somehow got free and perhaps knocked the killer down or otherwise incapacitate him temporarily. Bobby and Linda then ran up the stream in an attempt to escape. The killer then reached for his gun and shot them. It seems that the killer then walked to the location where they fell and shot them where they fell. He then shot Bobby 10 more times in the back and Linda 8 more times in the chest. One of the newspapers reported that there were powder burns on them, so at some point he shot them at a very close range. The topography has changed since I was here in 1962. Back then there was a path that led up to the shack from here, not this wall of dirt. My brother told me that there was major flooding in this area in the late 1960s, which may account for the erosion. The account from Detective Baker is that the killer then dragged Bobby face down some 30 yards to the shack and placed his body inside. He then dragged Linda face up and placed her on top of Bobby. The shack was very small. Again, my memory of this building is 48 years old. It was about as big as 2 outhouses side by side. It had an opening covered by a tarp-like blanket for a door, and a large window opening to the right, as I recall. At some point, he cut Linda's bathing suit to expose her breasts, but she was not sexually assaulted. The account does not report if the killer took souvenirs from the couple. Serial killers at times take some object or objects from their victims. We know that the Zodiac killer took a piece of victim Paul Stein's shirt and sent segments to authorities to prove that he was the killer. Some suggest that he may have taken Mr. Stein's glasses as well. Again, see ZodiacKiller.com for details. We know that the killer brought pre-cut sections of rope to Bobby and Linda's murder scene, more than were necessary for tying up 2 people. He also brought several boxes of .22 caliber shells and some matches in addition to the gun and a knife. Remember, he cut the bathing suit. The final act reported is that the killer attempted to start a fire by setting the tarp covering the door on fire. He evidently tried several times but could not get it to burn. Finally, he left the matches, ammunition, unused rope, and footprints sometime late that afternoon as he fled the scene. The long tradition of Senior Ditch Day at Lompoc High School was celebrated for the last time on June 4, 1963. After that year, it was changed to a formal class event, well supervised with all students accounted for. My senior year in 1965, we spent 24 hours at Disneyland. Most of the seniors in 1963 went to a specific location by informal agreement. According to Assistant Principal William Welch, Bobby and Linda had not signed out to be away from school that day. None of the students at the scheduled ditch event knew where they were. Bobby's father and mother became alarmed when the couple did not come home by late evening of the 4th of June. Bobby told his father they were, quote, going to the beach for the day when he and Linda left for the beach about noon that day. Mr. Domingos tried calling everyone he could think of, starting early on the morning of the 5th. No one knew anything. He checked everywhere, including with many of the young people who went to the scheduled event that day. He reached out to his extended family, and they entered the search. Finally, at 12 p.m. on the next day, June the 5th, 1963, Mr. Domingos filed a missing person report with the Lompoc Police Department. The police did not take the situation seriously because the couple had not been missing for 24 hours. All the day of June 5th, the family searched for the couple. Finally, a 19-year-old cousin of Bobby remembered that the couple had been to an isolated stretch of beach somewhere south of Gaviota, some 25 miles south of Lompoc. He and his father, along with Mr. Domingos, drove south on US 101 until they found the car Bobby had driven that day, a 1957 Pontiac, parked behind some bushes in the median of US 101. They spotted a California Highway Patrol officer making a traffic stop just south of Vista Del Mar School on the northbound lane of Highway 101. CHP officer Paul Schultz walked with the family down to the beach across from the location where they found the car. They found some evidence that the couple had been at the beach, and then the blood and shell casings a few yards up the stream. Bobby's cousin told the officer about the shack some 30 yards up the path. The CHP officer walked up to the shack alone and found the bodies. Trooper Schultz reported the time he discovered the bodies was 9:30 on the evening of June 5, 1963. He further reported finding boxes of shells, unused pre-cut pieces of rope, burnt and unused matches, and towels from the beach. He reported that there had been several attempts to set the tarp covering the doorway on fire. The trooper also found clothing and other materials the couple brought with him that day. Trooper Schultz looked in the Pontiac parked in the median. It was locked and appeared undisturbed. Linda's purse was on the front floorboard, and there were clothes the couple was believed to have changed out of in the back seat. Dr. John Blanchard completed the autopsies on the couple. Ray Pinker, the forensic chemist with the Los Angeles Police Department, evaluated the crime scenes and the bodies. Sheriff Webster sent county jail prisoners supervised by deputies to systematically scan for clues in a wide area around the shack where the bodies were found on Friday after the murders.